just looking at this, Mike. You got Mr. Trump's down there, Senator Scott, Republican leader Scalise, my pal Kellyanne. It's a glittering group, and you're going to glitter with us. We appreciate you coming back. You know, Mike, I mean, this is a lot of. This is almost like Alice in Wonderland with the Mad Hatter. So this morning, the Labor Secretary, and it's not personal, by the way, he's just doing what he's been told to do. He tells my great pal Stu Varney that even though oil prices are up to whatever they're up to, $115 a barrel, there's no plans to put oil and gas back on the table, quote unquote. So there's no drill. And at the same time, Mike, there seems to be plans to complete, maybe within hours, a new nuclear deal with Iran that would include removing all the sanctions. So let me get this right. We can't drill here. We're still buying Russian oil, and we can't wait to buy Iranian oil. Mike Pence, there is something wrong with that calculus, it seems to me.
No, Larry, there's everything wrong with that scenario. And I appreciate you having me on. What's happening in Ukraine is a travesty. The Russian invasion of Ukraine, the senseless bombing of civilians, 1 million refugees have already crossed the border. And this administration continues to hesitate to impose sanctions on essentially the lifeblood of the Russian economy. I mean, the reality is we need to continue to arm the Ukrainians so they can defend themselves. We need to sanction all the financial institutions in their sector. But the time has come for the United States of America to impose an embargo and sanctions on all oil and gas exports from Russia. I mean, to have this administration actually announce last week to make the point that their sanctions have no effect on the energy sector, and then even to have the administration's press secretary defending that only 10% of our oil imports come from Russia. I mean, people are dying, Larry, and the American people understand that every dollar that we send to Russia at $115 a barrel is being used to finance this war effort in Ukraine. We need to impose those sanctions. We should not be negotiating with Iran or working with Russia to restart the Iran nuclear deal. And for heaven's sakes, President Biden ought to demonstrate real American strength, restart the Keystone Pipeline, let loose the dozens of oil and natural gas leases that have been tied up from the advent of his administration, and set America back on a path toward energy independence. That's the only pathway forward to stopping Putin in his tracks, ultimately getting him to withdraw from Ukraine. But I have to tell you, I have never seen an administration getting more wrong at once in a time of crisis in the world than we're seeing today.
You know, Mr. Vice President, they're kind of sneaking around, right? So all attention is on Ukraine, as I suppose it must. But, you know, we spent some time on it last night on this show, and I'm glad to see now more prominent in the media. Doing an Iran deal under any circumstances, I think you would agree, sir, is a lousy idea. They lie, cheat, and steal. All they're doing is developing nuclear reactors. They're very close to it anyway with the enrichment. But to do it now, to reward Russia, who is their big ally and, you know, godfather in the Middle East, who's at the we shouldn't even be at the same negotiating table with Russia right now, it seems to me. And then, you know what's going to happen. They're going to make a case. Biden will get up there and say, well, Saudi Arabia didn't give us enough oil, but Iran will give us enough oil. I mean, that's just enough to pull your hair out.
Larry, I think it'd be shocking to the average American here in Louisiana or anywhere across the country to think that at a time that Russia is invading Ukraine, that the American administration is actually working with Russia to restart the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, it number one, on its face, makes no sense. But you're absolutely right. I mean, when our administration came in office, President Trump ended the Iran nuclear deal because not only did it not prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, it essentially guaranteed that they would have a nuclear weapon in a 10-year period of time. And now what we're hearing about these negotiations is they're back on the 10-year time window. The only difference now, as we read in the newspapers today, is Iran has more enriched uranium today than they had at the time that we got out of the Iran nuclear deal. Look, we isolated Iran as never before. I'm going to be in Israel next week meeting with the new prime minister, the former prime minister, the current president. Whatever this administration is doing, the American people stand with Israel, and we need to expose any deal this administration agrees to for what it is and make it clear that the next American administration will get out of that deal every bit as quick as the Trump-Pence administration got out.
Yeah, boy, every bit as quick. You're right, sir. Cavalry's coming, just can't come.
Ready to make a deal with Iran. Iran was in a bad position. We were ready to make a deal with them. And China understood they can't buy, or we would not do business with them. They made a fortune off our country, although I took in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs and taxes on China. First time anybody ever took in 10 cents. We took in hundreds of billions.